to my PMP Exam Preparation training series. Today we'll discuss the environment in which projects operates. This includes enterprise environmental factors, which are either internal or external, organizational process assets, organizational governance, organizational structures, and then PMOs and the different types of PMOs. All right, so let's go ahead and look at enterprise environmental factors. In this one, what you'll see is that there are two types of factors that would influence your project. One, which is the one on the left, are the enterprise environmental factors, and those are made of either internal factors or external ones. And we'll expand on those in a little bit. The other item that would affect or influence your project will be the organizational process assets. And this is typically internal because that's the organization's own process assets. So when we say an asset, right? An asset is something that the organization has, it owns, it's able to use, it can utilize it for its own benefit. So if I had 3 buildings, then these are my assets, right? If I have stock investments, these are my assets. For an organization, they have assets, they have capital assets and so on. And, we say people are the organization's assets, or employees are the assets, and they have actual physical assets, and they have cash, liquid cash, and other forms of monies. And so we refer to these things as assets. But here, what we're discussing is organizational process assets. So these are the assets that have to do with processes. So things that are developed, or processes that are developed to a point where the organization is able to use it and reuse it as often as it would like and be able to benefit from that. And on the right here, you'll see corporate knowledge base, which is one of those, assuming an organization has been around for a long time, if it has been collecting, information pertaining to its projects and operations, historical data, and so on, this is going to be very valuable going forward and they can use it in operating their business. So corporate knowledge base is considered a process asset because there's information in there that simplifies its processes going forward. Along with that, we have the processes, policies, and procedures. If we compare two organizations, one that is mature and the other one that isn't, you'll find that the mature organization typically has well-developed policies and procedures for everything they do, whereas the immature organization or very young organization is still trying to figure it out. So we can say that the mature organization has assets when it comes to processes that it can use in running its business. Let's take a look at some of the examples that are considered enterprise environmental factors to an organization. Let's look at some of the internal ones, right? Let's start with this one here, the organizational culture, structure, and governance. An organization can have a culture of risk-taking or an organization of risk-averse, meaning they like to take chances or they don't, right? Risk-seeking, they like to take chances. Risk-averse, they don't like to take chances. The culture of the organization could be, based on the age group of the people or the nature of the work they do, the style in which they work, the office setup that they have. I don't know if you've watched I think it's called The Intern or The Internship. It's about Google, essentially. And it shows two people that get a job with Google. And when they go in there, they're surprised and shocked by how Google works. It's a lot of young people that have very unconventional ways of working, not the usual desk job that you would see out there. So we say they have a different culture there in how they do their work, right? And then there's also things such as, how well the organization communicates. Some organizations don't communicate well, and so we can say there is no culture of communication. And sometimes it's about, excuse me, So we say there is no culture of communication. Sometimes it's about trust. There's no trust in the organization. And other times it's about, how many people are staying with the company and how many are leaving, how fast are people leaving. So you get a general sense for the feelings that one would get if you walk into an organization. What do you sense when you walk into this organization? How do they think? How do they behave? That's the culture of the organization. Then there's the other point, which is the structure and governance. Structure, you're looking at, different departments, management style, which is also overlapping with governance. Is the organization run as departments with heads of departments making decisions? Is it a flat organization? What type of a structure does the organization have? That's going to have an effect on how well you can run your project. The culture of the organization is going to have an effect on how well you run your project. If they don't have any trust, then obviously the PM would have a very hard time going around talking to different stakeholders and collecting requirements. The last piece there, governance. How well is the organization in control? Do they have procedures and policies for everything? Do they maintain, real-time or accurate data? Do they do audits? So that tells you the management or oversight culture of the organization. That's what we refer to as governance. All right. Moving to the right, geographic distribution and facilities and resources. An organization can be all in one spot where the whole company is there, or it could be spread into different branches or different countries. And so that distribution, whether it's in one or multiple locations, is going to affect how well you're able to engage the different stakeholders and collect all the requirements as needed. The infrastructure of the organization also is important. Think about IT infrastructure, network infrastructure. If these things are there, if they have knowledge bases and so on, which takes us to information technology software. If they have knowledge databases and if they've been saving a lot of information, we can say they have a strong data orientation, or they have a strong infrastructure when it comes to data and information. But just if you just think from the plain side of things, just an IT infrastructure. Some organizations lack almost all of that. They have a Wi-Fi connection and they operate with that. Some have servers and they hold information and they do backups, and they have different systems for document management, different systems for let's say approvals and contract management, and that would be that infrastructure for the organization. Having these things, having a lot of infrastructure that is in place and usable is going to help the project manager, because the project is going to require a review of current state or requirements or processes or procedures, and the infrastructure is going to be very helpful in that regard. Resource availability is another thing. If you were doing the whole project by yourself, it's going to take you a long time depending on the size of the project. But if you have available resources with the right skill sets, people who have designated roles and functions that you can go to and ask questions, then that's going to help you in putting together your project plans. Employee capability, yeah, I think that one's already covered. That was the skill set of the team in the organization. When you go to an organization that has a designated, let's say, quality specialist, another one that does, for example, let's say the financial analysis, you have BAs. You have PMs, you have technical specialists in the technology that you're working on. Then you have engineers and so on. You feel a lot more confident in taking on the project. So these are the internal enterprise environmental factors that would affect your project. Now let's take a look at external points that would affect your project. Starting with, the outside, we look at the marketplace. Is the market in your favor? Is the economy doing well? Is there high demand for the product that you're working on? Are there suppliers that support that specific market? So that would be one thing you want to look at. And then social, cultural influences and issues, depending on which country you're in. There are laws and there are rules and there are behavioral aspects that you need to consider. So this is going to affect how you engage your stakeholders in a specific project. You also need to consider for your project legal implications of anything that you do. So you need to understand the law. You need to know what is allowed, what is not allowed, and whether some things can be restricted. Other things to look at: commercial databases. Is there a database or is there information that is recorded anywhere that would help you in planning out your project, in coming up with estimates for your project? Academic research is also similar to having commercial databases. This would be, are there published articles or white papers or books or studies that have been done with regards to what you're covering inside this one project. The other point here would be the industry standards or the government standards that are mandated. In every country, there are laws and standards that you need to abide by. And if you're running a project there, running a project, for example, in Japan, would have a different flavor than running it in the US or maybe in the Middle East, because each of these areas have its own rules, policies, and standards that you need to stick to. Financial considerations, this would be whether you're able to obtain loans or any kind of financial support for your program or project. And so definitely that's going to have an effect on your budgets or cash flow that you need to support the funding of your project. Finally, physical, environmental elements. This would be the infrastructure of the country or the vicinity in which your project is being run. And that could make things easier or more complicated for you as you run your project. Moving forward, let's take a look at organizational process assets. And there's a few items that fall into what we consider assets that the organization uses for processes. Number one, you can consider well-developed and pre-used procedures. These are things that are documented and everybody is able to follow and use, so that if it's project related, then most of the time you're going to see that that's developed by a project management office. So processes and procedures that are related to how we do project management. So for example, how do you gather requirements? Where do you record the requirements? So templates also fall into this category. Do we have well-developed templates that people on the project team can use? Is there a document or form or guideline for how we do risk management? If that's the case, then that's going to make it easier. Also, we have to look at whether we have policies that state that certain actions can be done or others can't be done, or that there's a specific way for us to do any type of activities. Policies that are well developed and supported by procedures and processes can be very beneficial to a project manager, because now you would feel that you're working in a very well controlled environment rather than a chaotic one. Organizational knowledge databases, extremely beneficial when you're trying to put together requirements or estimates for your project. So these databases, you're supposed to contribute to those as you work on your project, and the project team is supposed to be doing lessons learned along, maybe at the end of every phase, and then contributing to that knowledge base so that our project estimates on and plans would be more accurate as we move forward. I have here a list of examples of what we would consider organizational process assets, including, templates, as I mentioned, examples from previous project, tools, software tools that have been pre-configured and we can use them again, databases of information, historical information or lessons learned, processes that are well defined, issue management procedures, change management, risk management procedures. All of these things are considered organizational process assets. Organizational knowledge repositories are also considered organizational process assets, and these can include configuration management, knowledge bases, financial data, historical information, lessons learned. These points were previously listed. Data repositories for metrics, so KPIs, that have been used previously, and successes, versus these KPIs. Project files from previous projects, issues and defects that have been, documented, and we can go back and look at them. This is going to prove to be very valuable for a project manager, as opposed to having nothing to work with. Next, let's discuss organizational systems. What a system is a collection of various pieces or components that together can produce results you don't get if you were to use just one component. So for example, procedures, processes, policies, resources, infrastructure, all of these are considered the components, right, of a system, and the components when they're integrated and managed in a specific manner can produce some result or outcome. So we say that the outcome is the outcome of the whole system, but the components are the ones that are contributing to that one system. These components themselves as separate pieces can be optimized, improved. So for example, your resources are one component. You can optimize those. Your IT systems or document management systems could be another component, and that can be optimized. And once you do that, it has an effect on the overall system. So the system is the outcome of its own components, and by optimizing the components, then the system is improved. Now let's translate this to project management. We can say an organization has an excellent project management system, and that may include the certified professionals, project management professionals that they have. It could include a well-developed methodology, a PMO, maybe guidelines, rules, policies, some software like Microsoft Project or Primavera. All of these are components of a project management system. We can enhance one piece, one component like the resources, or maybe enhance the Microsoft Project system or Primavera system. I'm saying system, but what I meant is the software, Primavera software system that we use, and that would enhance the project management system. Let's take a look at this. What you see at the top, what you see at the top is the PM system, okay, at the highest level, right? And below that, you have Primavera, methodology, a project management methodology. So let's correct that. Project management methodology and the PMs themselves. If I was to improve the capabilities of the PMs, it is going to have a direct impact on my project management system. If the methodology is enhanced, it will also have an effect on the project management system. If the Primavera software system that we're using is configured in a more efficient way, then that's going to have an effect on our project management system. So the system, project management system, is the output that we get from the combination or integration of all of these components that you see here. Now let's look at organizational governance frameworks. Project governance refers to framework, functions, and processes that guide the project management activities in order to create the product that we're aiming for, the product, service, or result for which we're running the project. And that includes several things such as people, their roles, their structure, the structure of the organization, the policies that we have, and the oversight process and management process that we have in place. So it includes the rules, the policies, the procedures, and what is considered normal in the organization as behaviors and activities, the processes we use, the systems that are in place, and the relationships that we have within the team and between the team and its own, let's say, governing body or shareholders, and with external parties like customers and suppliers. When an organization thinks about putting together an organizational structure, they consider several aspects that would help them in how well they can govern that organization. What you see here is a list of different items or different factors that they will consider in putting together the structure that suits them best. So for example, cost, limited money means limited abilities, and that means limited resources. And what you'll find is that the same role could be done by multiple roles could be served by one person. They also look at, efficiency for performance purposes, simplicity, making sure that, ensuring that people can be accountable or responsible, and so on. So what you see here are different factors that an organization would want to consider. One important one here is communication and, span of control, efficiency, and effectiveness, how much they want to have for control. These things stand, separately, but an organization looks at each individual aspect here and decides what works best for them in putting together that organizational structure that they feel is a good option for them. So let's take a look at some of these organizational structures that have been widely used by organizations. Starting from, I'm going to just discuss some of the common ones. So I'll start with functional organizations or functional or centralized organization. In a functional organization, the organization is divided into different departments. So let's say every one of these is a department, right? And whenever they have a project, the head of the department will be the one that coordinates the project. They don't assign it to the team below. So even though there could be some team members below, right, they don't assign to the team members below. Instead, they take on the management of the project. And so you'll find that in every department, the head of that department is the one that's overseeing and managing that one project, not the team. So this we refer to as a functional organization. Okay, so that was the example of the functional organization. The heads of the departments would run the project. Now let's take a look at another one, which is called the weak matrix organization. In the weak matrix organization, the head of the department will assign the project to a technical person in that department, right? This technical person can collaborate with other resources in other departments in order to run this one specific project. But this technical person is not a PM, right? They're just a technical person. So this could be an IT guy who is being tasked with a project. Because the organization does not really have a true role for a project manager, and because they depend on technical resources to run their projects, we refer to this project as we refer to this one organization as a weak matrix organization. It does not mean that the organization is weak. What it means is that the role of project management is weak in the organization. It is not it's not a role that they see as as a designation they need to have, and they would rather give this to a technical resource. Now the next one after this is the balanced matrix, right? That was the weak matrix that we discussed. Let's look at the balanced matrix. Let's take a look at the same example. Let's just call this technical guy a project manager, right? This is a project manager with a true designation of project manager, and they report to a functional manager, right? They are in a department that is a functional department. It is not a project management office, it's a functional department. So this could be the IT department, right? And the PM reports to the head of IT, but he or she is a PM, right? This is a PM working below a functional manager. In this case, we say that there's a bit of a flavor of project management because now we have a designated role of a project manager, and we can refer to this as a balanced matrix organization. Okay. Now let's go to one level up. So it works in levels. The functional organization is the lowest presence of project management, and then it goes to a weak matrix, and then it goes to a balanced matrix, and then to the strong matrix. In the strong matrix, what we have is a PMO. So let's look at a PMO here. That's an example. And under the PMO would be all the PMs, right? If the PMs are not inside the PMO, the PMs could be inside the departments. But what happens here is that the PMO gets to drive project management in the organization. They get to control the activity or the procedures or the templates or the policies that are being applied in managing the project. Having a project management office, as you see here, represents a strong culture of project management, and that's why we call this a strong matrix organization. Now, there's one more here that we need to discuss, and that is the projectized organization. The projectized organization is also referred to as a project-oriented organization, and in the project-oriented organization, you'll have something that looks like this, maybe a CEO at the highest level, right? And below that, PM. So you're wondering what happened with all the departments. Well, there's going to be maybe a specific role here that handles multiple functions, but not a department, right? Project-oriented or projectized organizations tend to focus on projects. So it's a group of PMs that are being managed by maybe the owner or a director, and they are very much project-driven. So if they don't have projects, then there's nothing for them to do. They're not department oriented. They don't have an HR department, an IT department, a procurement department. They would have this one function here on the right, take care of different things, or maybe 2 or 3 or a few people that handle specific functions, but not departments. They're just, this would be very typical of contractors that take on projects, and when they have projects, they go and recruit a team to support the project. Once the project is done, then they go and eliminate that team, and then they're hoping that additional projects are coming in to the organization so that these PMs can remain in business, right? No projects, no business, and nothing to do. So we say this is a project-oriented or projectized organization. Obviously, you could always have a hybrid setup, and in a hybrid setup, what you'll see is that, and this is the one here, right? In a hybrid setup, you could have a mixture of a weak and a balance, where, or maybe a balanced and a strong matrix, right? Where we have the PM under a department, but you also have a PMO running, side by side with that, and the organization is maybe shifting from what they used to have into something that maybe is a little more mature. So you'll find here, you'll find the head of the organization, then you have all these departments, and here we have, in this department, we have a PM, and this is a department, right? And over here, we have a PMO, right? And it has its own PMs. So this part of the organization here is operating as a strong matrix, whereas the one on the left here is operating as a balanced matrix. So you can have such mixture, and this is called a hybrid structure for an organization. Okay, so the last thing here is the project management office. What is a project management office? It's a department, an organizational structure that takes care of project. It standardizes how we do projects. They put governance and control through policies and procedures that the PMs have to abide by. They facilitate sharing of resources, so a technical resource could be used on multiple projects, so they do resource management, and they typically would have a methodology made of several templates that they would use to unify how they document their project management plans and tracking of how, and monitoring and controlling and the change management processes that they use, and so on and so forth. So an organization that has a PMO gets or stands to benefit from the let's say from the skills of the team that is in the PMO, from the consistency in how they do things, and from the typical knowledge retention that a PMO can support. So if you look at the circle that is on the right here, you see that there are many functions that this PMO can support, including communication, saving files, lessons learned, coaching, guiding the project managers, supporting them when there are problems, doing risk management for them, requirements gathering, monitoring their project schedules, and flagging things when things are going wrong. So there is a very useful role for a project management office whenever you have a few to more projects within an organization. Now, an organization can have different levels of PMOs going from supportive to controlling to directive. Let me show you what these things would look like. On this chart that you see here, if the PMO was under a department, so let's say the PMO is sitting inside a department, then we refer to this as a supportive PMO. Why is it a supportive PMO? Well, this PMO can only do supportive functions. Assume there were PMs here, right? There's a PM inside here underneath that department. The PMO is technically at the same level, right, as these PMs, right? If, let me just erase some of these and you'll see what I mean, right? So put the PMO here, right? And then bring this PM that reports to that department, bring this PM down here that reports to that department. Now you can see that the PMO is at the same level as these PMs and therefore cannot control them. What it can do is it can take information from them on how, the status of their projects, and it can give them advice, tips, and provide templates and maybe guidance on how to run their projects, but cannot enforce anything in there. So this is a supportive PMO. It typically has the responsibility of collecting data, collecting project performance, and reporting up into the senior management up there, right? Controlling PMO goes one level higher. A controlling PMO would typically sit, let me move this a little bit here, so we can have a wider view. A controlling PMO would extend this and have the PMO at that level. At this level, the PMO is at the same power or strength as the departments and therefore is able to control and enforce rules when it comes to the PMs at the lower level. It is higher ranking and therefore can set the rules and guidance for these PMs. So if they put a process together or a methodology, they would be able to enforce it on the PMs, and they can take action if the PMs below here don't want to abide by these rules. So that's called a controlling PMO. The controlling PMO is pretty much the standard PMO out there, and that would be like the next level up from a supportive PMO. An organization typically would start with a supportive PMO, run it for about a year, and then so that supportive PMO that is down here would run for like 1 year, and then this controlling PMO may last for like 4 or 5 years, right? After which maybe they would want to consider having a directive PMO. The directive PMO sits at the highest level of the chain here, and it's sitting right below that CEO and is helping with strategic decision making. Because it is higher than the departments that we see here, it is able to control what the departments do. So it can decide which projects can run this year and next year. They get to sit on the strategic forming meetings on an annual basis. They tell the CEO or the governance board what they feel their capabilities are and what can be done this year or next year and which projects a department can run or not run. The directive PMO is very powerful and is sometimes referred to as a center of excellence in most organizations. That brings us to the very end of this one session. I hope you found this to be informative and useful. If you like it, I would like to ask you to subscribe, like and share. Let us know if you have any feedback or comments, and we will be happy to respond to those. We look forward to seeing you on our next video. Have a beautiful day and goodbye.